Hello and welcome to this very special episode of UX Conversations. My name is Aka Rudolph. I'm head of strategy at International Design Center Berlin and director of the UX Design Awards. And unlike our usual conversations where we talk with one design expert, we decided to invite 4 jury members from 2 different jury panels to this talk. So we're actually repeating this formula about a year back in October, actually, 23. We already talked about what it takes to communicate your design well, be it to a jury or to stakeholders. And we also shared advice for companies and individuals that might apply for the awards. So you can watch this jury digest from October last year on our website, uxdesignawards.com. But now we have a special edition with, as I said, 4 jury members from 2 jury panels. So let me briefly introduce them to you. Representing the Spring 24 jury panel, which is just finished, I would like to warmly welcome Annika Rupp. She is Senior Concept Information Architecture at Scholz & Volkmar. Hello, Annika.
Hello.
How are you? Along with Annika at the same jury panel was working Janet Aku Agbenu. She is Global Head of Brand Experience and Creative Direction at Siemens. Hi to Munich.
Hello to Berlin. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. And from the current Autumn 24 jury, I would like to welcome, first off in Stuttgart, Southern Germany, Bernhard Steiber, who is Unit Lead and Fellow at Intuiti Media Lab. Hello, Bernhard.
Hi there. It's great to be here.
And last but not least, June Moli. He is Managing Director of Phoenix Design, usually in Munich, but now in Milan. Hi, ciao, over to you.
Hello, great to be back.
It's wonderful that you could make it today and great to have all 4 of you for this conversation. I'm very much looking forward to hearing your opinions and your inputs. So in this talk, we wanted to place the spotlight actually more on the content level of what you feel is relevant about design and, of course, when you judge design as well and look at UX work. So starting off from that point of view, Janet, in light of your chairing the recent Spring 24 jury, when you are looking at work and when you reflect your judging experience, maybe can you share about what you felt was most important to you when you reviewed submission?
Sure. But also, thank you from my side to continue this discussion. I'm very happy to be here and hopefully providing more clarity and inspiration for those who are want or considering at the moment to apply for the next session. Please do so. We are very happy to have your applications. And coming back to your question, so what was important for me the last time? Maybe 2 things that might be considered more on a basic level, and 2 things that are very important to me personally, but happy to know what the others think. So for me, it's very important to have a good preparation beforehand. So from your team, Ake, a good preparation so that we can just dive into and just look at the cases and have clarity in what we are looking at. And what are the main storylines. This is also coming back to what you guys have been talking about the last time. So the preparation itself from the ones who are handing in the cases. So are they clear? Are they well structured? Do they provide insights and so forth and so on? I don't want to extend that. There's a great session on that one. Just go there and listen to that one again. For me, it's also important to have a very good team of judges from different backgrounds so that we can have a good conversation, but also agreeing on a set of criteria, judging criteria. And normally we do that always beforehand, before we start even looking at the cases. We are coming together and then talking about the judging criteria, for example, is something relevant? Is something that is tended in empowering? Is it focusing on the user, and so on and so forth? And on a personal level, it would be for me, am I allowed to play? So is there something that I can look at, that I can, like a storyboard or a click dummy, or if it is an app, I will definitely go and download it to try it. So that is something that is really important for me.
Your side, Annika, you were working together with Janet on that jury panel.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree with what Janice said. I think the criteria are super helpful when evaluating the entries, because they give a really good structure, and it's really what we're focusing on. Is the product relevant? Is it empowering for users? Are there innovative features? How's the experience quality and the design? So this already also gives a great outline for the entries, and to really focus what the special part is in each section. So it's really nice if we can understand exactly the process. For example, if we are looking at user-centric approach, what were the challenges? Which solutions did you find to really give us an idea of your process there as well? Because with the UX awards, there's so much behind, so it's not so easy sometimes to only look at it and then understand everything. So if you can help there and offer some insights that really go into your work, that's super great for the jury.
Was there something you were missing if you think back about the last jury session? Or maybe also Bernard and June, you were also on another jury back in 23. One important thing that that maybe keeps repeating itself, and it would be very valuable to include this when you submit.
I mean, I'm very grateful for your commentary just now, because we were now talking about being at a handover stage, so to say, from season to season, and it doesn't sound unfamiliar. Let me put it this way. So, of course, you might say now, oh, it's really lame. These poor jury guys, they can't come up with better ideas or better feedback on that sense. But it does show the importance, and it does show that it is still a thing that we can recommend to anyone, to everyone applying. And I can completely underline that those points. And we also in the season before then had these things. These observations, they're very similar. So there's no coincidence. One thing that I might like to add at this point, without sort of repeating everything all over again, is for anyone who's applying there, and most of you will be designers, maybe one way to regard these criteria that we talk about, that we offer up freely from our side, there's no secret about these things, it's all very transparent, is that when you look into them and take them very seriously, you will see that those are not news. They're probably the things that your professors at design school will teach you. They're things that many heads of designs will ask you for, or decision makers will ask you these questions. So it's not being mean or it's not being stiff. It's simply, if you regard those things as a tool, as a sounding board for yourself to produce feedback and help you reflect on your work, we are convinced that not only will your application be more successful, but also it might have an impact on the design itself. You might see stuff that you think, okay, I haven't tackled this angle in my design. So it is not just a pitch in that moment. It will help you to improve the product. What do you think, Bernhard?
Same here. I mean, we just have to understand what the basic challenge was. So you have to communicate that well. Sometimes it's a bit hard to if we have to dig into a specific field, which we might not be acquainted with, it's hard to do that as a jury with an amount of projects to scan. So it has to be quite understandable why was that a problem, and why does our project tackle that problem the right way? So why is it a good solution? So help us just to understand the challenge and to understand why your solution is in a way outstanding or priceworthy.
I think you touched an interesting angle here, Bernhard, that if it's a very specific, specialized field, it absolutely makes sense to describe a little bit about the situation there, where people are involved, and maybe even which technologies you used, and why, do they make sense in this context, and so to frame the context a little bit. And this takes me a little bit to something that that's not in the your usual checkbook of UX maybe, but something that we, I think, put a big focus on and a big pay attention to, which is I would say like the larger context. Looking at a holistic approach, and what do we expect that? What does that mean to you? Maybe Annika.
I think it's really considering different aspects, and also to make that visible, because sometimes it can be super hard from a jury perspective to understand the process, especially what Bernhard also said, if we're not so familiar with that specific field. So that is helpful, and also by understanding the context, it's easier to really evaluate the other criteria. So you can only really know about the relevance if you understand the context, or also for the user part. So having this context and the scope of your work is really helpful.
And maybe beyond the users itself, so the core users, right? So there is the instance of responsibility. Did you think about what ripple effects a product or a solution might have? Did you think about the consequences, and how? So how can you describe this well?
Generally, I would say there's some like questions regarding that. So there's a bit of a hint in the entries as well. But one really good example was a video that was really low key from a product team, and they just explained a bit about their product. It was nothing fancy at all. It didn't have any marketing value, but it's just really great to understand the product in a really simple and fast way. So that was a super good example for me.
Yeah, it doesn't always have to be like 100 pages of documentation. We also see that. So there are, especially among student projects, which is great, which I love. So extensive documentation of a project, which really helps to like get in touch deeply. It doesn't always have to be like that. So in daily business, I would say you don't have the time to do that, but you can still give us like 4 or 5 good points why an aspect is relevant, why a problem is really tricky, what the current status of the solution on the market is, and why you took a different approach to that. So be straightforward, be quick, but still students keep sending us the documentations. I love that, but it's not necessary in a way, right?
Can be also, if people are really concerned about showing the whole picture and love to send in all their materials because they want to make sure that we see how much sweat and blood went into the projects. It's also fine to have an executive summary beforehand, so that we really see you have the right insights, you applied a logical system to the product. So it's, if you want to send in and we have the time to dive into all of that, yes, of course, we are happy to do that. But just to have this quick decision and to get an overview of all the products, it's always helpful to have this, executive summary, I would say.
I do do believe that this is one of the more undervalued or maybe even misunderstood things in the skill set of a modern designer still up to this day, even though we've come a long way, but I can still see that this is the point that many designers should practice early on and regularly, because simply it might many designers, especially younger designers I work with, they feel not like being cheaters, but more like oh, but then you don't, the receiving side doesn't get the entire picture and doesn't know how hard it was and so forth. But the advice I always offer to anyone in that situation is do regard it in a way that you want to make sure what the other person understands. Right. And if you just provide everything, you're not making sure, you're not saying, look at this, look at that, look here, look there, and therefore, right? So the whole elevator pitch thing is so old and lame, I must admit. But if we are all very serious, this is how the world runs, right? What decision makers require in the end to be well informed. And the advantage is, I think, the biggest advantage for the designers, anyone, is you are in control of the conversation, and that is not easy. I think we can all agree it's not easy to write a good executive summary, but is a skill that is well worth investing. The earlier, the better, because over time, you will not just use it for the UX awards. You'll use it to become the global head of design, just like Janet or like anyone else. I mean, I'm seriously, I think this is, I see this day to day with working with designers, that it's hard, and I know it's hard, but do invest the time. This is an excellent advice.
Are there any ways of how to set this up, how to test this before submitting or before presenting to somebody? Any tips you could share with people?
How to do it, you mean?
Yeah, what's important, what's key for you? What would be the main points? What would you like to relay?
Well, I think it sort of cross connects to where we started today, and that is no coincidence. Usually, there is a very classic rhythm of thought that is being applied all over the world, and many companies and also situations, which is you should be able to quickly move on to what's really the problem. Most of them W questions, right? Like, go through the big W questions. It's like, so what is the problem? Please, no more than 2-3 sentences. And then what is the situation out there? What is the opportunity that you've discovered? And what are you suggesting? And so what, right? Well, what's the outcome? And of course, we're all, especially I am, in such a great position to talk about this, like in a broadcast like this. I know it's hard. It's really hard, and this is what it's about. It is hard, but because it's hard, so few people do it well. And if you do it really well, you will be rewarded with lots of like aha and lots of attention. And then you wait for decision makers, for jury members or anyone else to actually say, okay, go on. Now you have my attention. I think that's really interesting. Can you elaborate, please? And then you flip out the 150-page research deck that you've provided with it. It's like, by the way, here is the research. Which part do you want to know more about? Right? It sounds funny, and I don't want to make it too stale. Obviously, this is the way I talk, but it is like this, isn't it, Janet? I mean, you are in a very large business environment where time is of the essence, patience is short, probably, and you want people to get the lowdown as quickly as they can in your way. Isn't it that way?
Yeah, definitely. So I can totally underline what you say. So the why, what, how, it's always very important and very helpful also to just test yourself in what you are doing on a daily basis, not only in writing executive summaries, but also really, control yourself. Do you get to the point? Do you bring your message across? Because these three questions are just what everybody wants to know. And then, as you said, you can definitely dive deeper.
In some countries, if that's of any help, in some countries, you will get, let's not talk about countries, and let's say in some business environments, you'll get, depending on the decision maker, very straight, very fast feedback. I have been in situations where decision makers will interrupt you. I mean, you can imagine they like to interrupt me because I like to talk without end. So they will say, "Okay, get to the point." Now, so what is it about? Bottom line, in a nutshell, what do you want, and so forth. And I think if you do the role play thing in your head beforehand, you sort of ask yourself, okay, what might these people be really interested in order to make that decision? You'll probably come up with a very different type of prioritization as to how you want to pitch this whole thing. So then you'll say, okay, I think I missed out on this point, but this seems to be high on the list. So a little hint, right? Like criteria, okay, that whole relevance topic seems to be high on the list. So why don't I sit down and think about, is it truly relevant, and what do they mean by that? Or should I send an annoying email to Arke and ask him, what do you mean? Is it relevant? Why not? Right. So I think that there's lots of help out there, but I do believe that most people are either too timid or are running out of time or they're not getting to the point to actually engage with those things. And today, I think, and also last time, but especially today, it's a good moment to underline how helpful that can be, not just how important, but how helpful that can be.
Can connect to that. And also coming back to Aki's question is, well, when do you start? How do you get help in doing that? I mean, ideally you would start right away with that question before you even start doing the project. So why am I doing that? What is the best way to approach that, right? And it should accompany you during the whole process. And so you can ask your colleagues, pitch the versions of your idea to your colleagues, ask them for feedback, be precise, be clear about your goals, and that's the best test for your idea. And then when you submit your work to a jury, you only have to take that out of the shelf and hand it over, right? So I guess you have to start with the right questions, then you will end up with probably a good solution.
On that to that point, one thing that I do like to add is not to be fooled or mistaken as to how much time or how much effort you should invest into these executive summaries, or like a little 30-second video where you openly talk about these things, because many people think if something is short or if it's not a lot of text, surely it doesn't allow you to invest a lot of time. But the opposite is true. I think that is something that many people I see have doubts about. They get self-doubts. They sort of ask themselves, is it okay to invest 3 hours into a short project manifesto, or 3 short sentences? Should I not just be done with it in 30 minutes? No. There are, in the professional world, there are people who actually sit down for 3 sentences for an entire day because they want to make it so crisp that it can't be misunderstood. It hits everyone right into their hearts, and you're very clear about why this is so important and so relevant. So no, it's not wasted time. It's just very unusual, maybe, depending on where your craft is. Right? I'm quite sure you can sort of play the when you're in motion design, you can spend an entire day and a night on top of that, just playing with the easings and the little details and the transitions and all of that. And maybe other people might say, oh, why are you investing so much time? Because it makes a difference. So it's the same thing with language, with writing. It's it's a myth that writing is talent. Writing is just hard work. Right? Hemingway was a workaholic, and his language is so simple, deceptively simple, but that's the hard bit.
You're right. There is also a saying that some attribute to Goethe is, I didn't have time to cut it short, so I wrote a long letter. So actually, yes, it's hard, and it's about bringing over to the other person's the essence, right? And telling a little bit also about your story of your work and what did you do, what decisions did you make, and why did you do them, and what did you base them on. So yeah, I agree. That's really a key element, and it's worth to take time to put effort into this, because it's also a kind of teaser that will help you to bring either judges or other stakeholders to look into more details, because they'll be hooked and they'll see it really makes sense. Another aspect, relevance, you had also a little bit touched on this already. Like relevance, it's something, and you said rightly so, what would people might think? What do they mean by this? Because it can have so many meanings. And I mean, the UX Design Awards are not limited to screens and UIs. So we look also at environments. We look at different sensory experiences, at products, physical products, and relevance to me comes a little bit down to impact, creating a positive impact in a space. And this doesn't matter if it's large or small. And this is what I love about design, and also about your decisions in the past years, is that sometimes awards were given to seemingly small, maybe even incremental solutions, but that nevertheless had a big impact on people in that field. I just remember, the redesign of alarm sounds in clinical devices 1 or 2 years back. So, and it had a huge impact. It was something overlooked for 30 years. So it's really difficult, though, to place the finger on something as vague as relevance.
Well, I do believe the example that we saw last year, and maybe if you don't remember, go look it up on the internet. No, I'll just quickly summarize it for you. So it was done by a Philips design team. That was a product, and that team had basically worked or had the insight that the alarms that some of the devices, especially I think intensive care patients, would be exposed to could be exposed to were quite distressing or distressful. And you might think, oh yeah, but that's goals achieved, because an alarm is supposed to bring you into a state of alarm. But at the same time, the insight that was so surprising was that no, we do realize that people should get notified that something serious is going on, maybe, but let's also think about the relatives in the room. Let's also think about the patient, and do we need to let that person know with a shrill sound that person is in a very bad state, or should we get control of the audible situation and take a different approach, a more a softer, still an alarm, but a softer sound. And they designed that. And I think that really is a fantastic example you're bringing up, because relevance is something that makes a substantial change, that makes everyone go, aha, okay, or take a new perspective on something that we've been used to for 20 or 30 or even 5 years, right? So it turns our perspectives into a even better perspective and introduces a new future that is much better for everyone. One difficulty here is, I feel always, and for us, you might agree, in all jury teams, is the discussion about, so what then is relevance, right? So does it always have to be on a global level, or does it need to solve grand political problems? And obviously, it's admirable if you can do that with your product, but one of the more important things is that it should address something that is important to a group of people that is really out there. I think that is all it takes. And in order to achieve, though, that we also get it as jurors, we have empathy, we're designers, we've seen things, and yes, we can get our heads into a situation, but still, when you show us with your product, the most important thing is give us that context. Tell us, why is that important to even a very small group of people, right? Because that makes work so much easier for us, and it also helps you to bring across the gravitas, the gravity of the situation that people are exposed to, and then we are the ones who will say, like, oh, okay, I really didn't know, and this is indeed a very, very interesting proposition that you're doing here. And I think that is showing that value can be done in many creative ways, and the goal must and should be that we do understand, oh, okay, yeah, this is, now we understand, so let's see look at the product from that perspective.
Just one example, maybe from a bit of older days. I mean, the invention of the wheel, right? That was pretty groundbreaking, I would say. But you can't reinvent the wheel as a basic concept every year. But look how many different wheels are out there. So, and they all serve their purpose and are applied in, I don't know, billions of cases. And every newly invented like variation of that wheel might still be a game changer for a certain industry. So I think it's always valid to not strive for the like world-changing, mind-boggling idea. Would be great to have that every year, but it's also fine to elaborate on really relevant cases for a smaller group of people, like June just said.
Yeah, I can also totally relate to that, and I really love that example. I wasn't part of that jury when that was discussed, but just reading about it or just hearing you, June, speak about it, I can totally relate to that, because the last 3 years I was at the dentist and having all that noise constantly coming across, and you sitting there just helplessly. You would wish that there's an invention that making that experience more, yeah, I would say, more relaxing for somebody who's sitting there. But I would also say, Bernard, like you just mentioned, you cannot always reinvent the wheel. But if you're staying current and just listen to your customer and always making sure that you have this conversation and maybe telling us as well that there's something, that there's an upgrade of something because you have that feedback. I think that is also really, really relevant for a product, that you're staying current, that you're going with the trends, that you may be looking at new technologies that you integrate into something that is already out there or existing. It doesn't need to be something completely new, but if you introduce tiny new things that make it even better for your target audience, then I would say that is also very, very relevant.
So it could be the sum of small steps and little things, right? Because like in your jury group, Janet and Annika, you decided to give a gold award to a coffee grinder, and we were a bit surprised at that
Yeah, we're
moment,
always surprised, yes.
but then the pieces fell somehow. So the pieces fell together, and we realized, well, this is a sum of many different aspects that really make sense, even including the quality of the industrial design, the materials, sustainability, the ability to repair it beyond the use case itself. Annika, I think you were judging that product, so it was also about helping people to cooperate together through IoT and connectiveness, but also a very clever way to connect digital and physical functions.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's that's where the sounds and the coffee grinder, they do have some similarity after all, because it's just like small aspects that can make a big change and can be really relevant to certain situations. So for example, the case of the coffee grinder was just presented with like super thorough research, and it was very relatable and understandable how it really benefits in certain scenarios. For example, for coffee chains and for onboarding of new employees, the cleaning was improved. There's like warning and maintenance help, like those things, even though it is a coffee grinder and might not be the most obvious choice at the first moment, it really makes sense to pay all this attention to detail. And that was also what really fascinated us about the case, and yeah, how good the work was in all those different aspects, really.
Thanks to the good documentation and to how transparently and clearly they portrayed the use case and the outcomes and the steps, right?
Yes, exactly.
One thing that is helpful to remember is that, yes, some insights that we gain through research will have a massive, obvious impact and on the world, and there'll be a revolution, lead to a revolution. I don't think I have ever come across such an insight myself. I'd love to, but so that's one thing. The other thing, though, is that insights don't have to obviously lead to the solution, the universal solution to the world's problems. Right? They need to be relevant in their field, in their context. That's one thing. And B, start thinking about insights. Why is it so hard to find good insights? It is hard because they are hard to find, and hard to find stuff is often the little things that we don't notice anymore because we're a bit numb, because we're used to so many things, and it is those small, sometimes even very silent or very humble things that the details that Annika talked about, that you talked about, that will have this big potential. So I think what I really want to encourage everyone to think about is, or to feel, is that don't be too shy with, even if you think, oh, this insight is not big enough. The question is it really something that was hard to detect, hard to identify, and you're really proud of that little detail, and look at what I did with that. So that is all we're asking for.
And I would just like to graze a little bit on another element, which is, of course, we're getting more and more products and solutions and systems based on AI technology as they evolve more and more. And so it's obvious we get to judge them, but I would like a little bit to demystify AI here, because we often also see submissions, applications that claim well, AI is under the hood, it will solve the problem. And that's not the case. And or maybe it can be the case, but it's how can we judge this? How can we determine how it works? So, I mean, Bernard, your Intuit is working a lot on with AI tech. What should people, when they submit products based on AI technology, what would you expect them to be clear about?
It's a good question. I mean, I would say in general, the fundamentals have not changed. I always want to know what was the problem, how was it solved? That's all we just discussed. With AI, of course, it's special because I mean, I don't want it to be the magic potion. I want to know, I want to have clarity about the specific task it has taken on in a project. So, did it support the creative process, or does it handle data processing tasks differently, like it was done before? Does it make processes or solution more accurate or more customized or more efficient? For whom does it create added value? Is it just a fancy feature you can put on the box, or is it really making a difference? And I'm very critical about that. And we see a lot of that solutions in submissions, yes, and it will increase. And I'm really like bored of solutions that are only claimed to be clever and make a difference. I really want to understand why and how it makes a difference, basically.
I see nodding all around. So this is about how does AI further the product goal actually and the aim, and what actually is enhanced. Does this lead to any better results, right? And to whom? And of course, about considerations about safety, responsibility, I guess, as well. Did you think about people using the technology and how they respond to it? What might be hesitations, and how do people read this technology, or how do they interact with it? So there's also a great talk with Sophia Ryan on this topic that you might visit on our website as well. There is one topic that that really lies close to my heart, so I would like to bring it up before we finish, because next year we'll have a new law coming in Europe about accessibility, actually. So it's the Accessibility Act, and it basically says that any kind of product, be it digital, physical, a system, a vending machine, an online shop, they have to be accessible to people with disabilities. So it's something that actually should be the base in design work and in most products, and there is a lot of standards around it. So there is this checkbox approach of saying like, yes, we have this Lastenheft, this great German word. This is the list of must-dos. But there is the opportunity to go beyond this if we have this opportunity. And a law is often also, a regulation is often also bringing a topic forward. So it tells you you have to address this, but how you address this, this is a great opportunity as well, I think, and not just regulatory hammer. So thinking about making products not only accessible but more attractive while being accessible, or using this opportunity to maybe address also other senses beyond just the visual, which we are so fixed about, but we have many other senses as well. What are your thoughts about this?
Not with a concrete example that I can just bring up readily now, but generally, I do very much welcome the Accessibility Act. Let's see what real impact it will have on everyone, and on designers worldwide, or manufacturers who offer products, digital or non-digital. But I am a staunch believer that politics is design on the highest level, design policy. So that is one thing. It is a design decision for me. And it is good because it really forces everyone now to be very serious, not just, not the typical thing that's been going on for a long time. But yeah, we really user-centered and interested in research and, people first and all that. I've used those words myself. I know that. But, I mean, I would still consider myself being one that has been a staunch believer of, doing everything for people. That's why we have jobs, right? Because people, consumers in that sense, will decide what they will use and buy and what they will love and what they won't love, what they will reject. So this is a great opportunity that will force ourselves, encourage ourselves to be very serious about making things great to use. That's it. That should be the thing, and I can imagine there will be many problems because if you were not so serious about that before, you will be more serious about that now. And yes, it will be painful to some extent, but the output is great because this is something that will make things better for everyone, right? We're not talking about accessibility. It doesn't mean talking about disabilities, but it simply means accessibility, and that will make things great for kids, for elderly, for normal people, for an international crowd. So this is fantastic. It was really great.
I also would agree that there's a lot of potential in that one to make to really look at products from a different angle. So when just thinking about my own work, of course, Siemens as a global company, we have to apply to a lot of standards. That's very important for us. But also, I remember a case that we had during our last jury session that we're looking at different angles for blind people and helping them to experience, I think, household products through different interactions, different materials, different sounds that were provided. So I think although it might at first sight seems like a limitation, and I also know that from my work, agencies and designers like to come with great ideas, and then when you ask for apply the accessibility standards, they're like, oh, okay, what can we do? But also design, I think per definition, is really something that can thrive within a certain set of limitations, and we should be all just maybe triggered, not to say inspired, but really to explore these limitations and to make products better, applying these limitations so that people with different limitations and EU-wide can now experience products in the same way. I think it's a great one.
I also think that it helps in so many other contexts. So that's why I really think it's good that there's a law to push this maybe a bit more, because even, I don't know, if you're traveling with a huge backpack or there's a parent with kids on their hands, there's always situations in which we can't move around the way we're used to, or there's just more flexibility, and lots of features, just like voice control, for example, we know them now, but they really also came from that angle that it allows users to use products without visual displays. And in the end, it really benefits everyone. So it can be really interesting to find new patterns and just to maybe be a bit more flexible, to have more adjustment in products, which a lot of operating systems and all that are already doing. But I think a law like that will further this development more. And then I'm really interested to see what can be created from that.
Totally agree, Annika. I mean, it's really a good point. So it can enrich an experience and not limit it. So we should really see it as an encouragement to come up with multisensory solutions which are more open to choose the right channel that fits for me, not only because I have barriers or limitations, but because I choose to do that, or because the situation asks for that. Like you also pointed out beforehand. And I think what it will do, or what it should do, it should remind us designers that we don't design for ourselves. We claim to do that, we do research and so on, but in the end, of course, you are biased because you are you, and we have to acknowledge that there are a whole bunch of different people with different like sensory abilities out there, and we have to be we have to accept that and work with that actively and come out of our corner. And it might change it might like take the process upside down. I would say we will see more standards like we already do in the web. I mean, login is login. Every login works the same. It wasn't that way 15 years ago, I would say. So standards will increase, but that's a chance because like if you have 60 or 80% standards, you can thrive on the 20% that's left and really go for a really special outstanding solution. So use that stage that you still have, built on robust standards, and everybody will be happy and great solutions will come out. But you have to change the process you work.
Change the process into what or how?
I mean, just pick your battles, I would say. Just agree you don't have to reinvent the wheel with every single element of the interface, for example. So apply standards which are open for or accessible to as many people as possible. And that saves a lot of time and work and dedication. But don't stick to these standards, but use the rest or the most of your time to build on that basis, build great products upon that basis. So just like rearrange your process and put your creativity in specific aspects and not the whole project.
Which would be also related to user research or observation, do you think? Or is it also about creating situations that are out of the ordinary? Let's say we able-bodied and sensory able people test situations, but we are not all.
I mean, research is key
Right.
because you have to learn how people what they encounter in their everyday lives, how they get along, what limits them maybe. So research is basic and will hopefully become more important. And you don't have to argue why you want to have research. And even if it takes time and costs a lot of money, people will now like acknowledge that it's important because you have to get the knowledge to be accessible. So that's I would say good news for research. But also your ways of working can then change, like I just said.
I do think that in the early stages of, if we're talking about a new segment of where we're moving in product development and design, that yes, it'll be a bit more effort than in the past. It will not be as easy anymore because you do have to be a bit broader. But one thing I might say now is, shouldn't we have done that anyway in the past, right? I mean, if we're like really serious about these things, then yes, we could have done that, but we are all sort of, you know, in a meta. We're not trapped there, but it's simply, I regard this change as opening our eyes and sort of also giving us the encouragement now on a legal level or on a policy level to go into this. Bottom line, though, with the standards that you talk about, I find that very interesting. It will one thing that I can see is that we will have an easier time figuring out good interaction and functionality for a very broad user base, and can focus more on the tonality, on the actual meaning that we want to transport through our brands and through styling and through experiences on top of a great functionality. So maybe it's a bit like, business class and economy class flying this. The business class is, I always feel sort of, this is the way everyone should fly, rich and poor. Everyone should be flying business class because this is what it's supposed to be. But it's still very expensive. And comparing that to now, what I expect is we are going to, supported by the Accessibility Act, we now all have a chance to develop products the way they are supposed to be, right, for everyone. They are supposed to be like this. They've always been supposed to be like that in the first place. And now we're getting this encouragement. Yes, a bit of force, a bit of constraint, and it will end up in products that are more generous, more thought through, better to use, a much better experience for everyone. And this is something I feel is a huge merit over time. We have to go through that little jump through the burning, how do you call that? Jump through those burning hoops.
Burning spire.
But bottom line, things will get much better through such things.
And it doesn't have to be about luxury at all. So, I mean, accessibility is about creating more accessible products, and in the end, a more accessible, just society. I just remembered when you were talking about a research project, which I found really, really clever. I think it was a new talent research project a couple of years back. And that person, the student, created a user interface for ticketing machines without any words, because she realized when her parents from Korea came to Germany, they couldn't read the vending machines and buy tickets, and vice versa, she couldn't in Korea. So she tried to create a completely new set of icons that would be universally understandable. And this is where inclusiveness and a design effort comes into play in a potentially global scale, just by observing, the situation and different people might, and the struggles of different people in a situation that is maybe ordinary to you. So yes, I go along with you rooting for the Accessibility Act, but looking forward to designers to create attractive solutions going beyond the Lastenheft. So just a very short get out to each one of you. I would like to know from you, what would you like to see among the award submissions, if you had a wish? What are you looking forward to in the next round? What would you like? What would surprise you? What kind of technologies? What kind of approaches, mindsets? Annika, can you go first?
It's a good question. I think it's not so much about a certain technology. It's more about the clarity of like the topic of relevance that we actually discussed. I think to have in mind that there can be really niche solutions, and to just like relate to those and to learn more about this specific feature that might help a lot of people. And it's just a super clever solution. I think that's always really inspiring to see.
For me, it wouldn't also not be just about a certain technology or a certain trend that I want to see. But I think I really enjoyed the projects that show certain creativity, collaboration, that think that inclusivity is very important for them, that are trying to bring a solution to the world that make it better. I think this is always a good thing. But also, and this is very hard, especially for designers, to have this connect between what is the design value and what is the business value, and how I'm bringing this together and how do I explain that. I think this is amongst the things that we discussed in the beginning, having an executive summary, talking about this connect and trying to make people understand that I'm not doing something just for myself, but that what I'm bringing to the market, that I'm bringing to the world has a business value. And how do I explain that? That is something that I'm always enjoying to see, because it's challenging for all of us. And this is really something where I like to learn. But also, as I said, this seeing different projects that are creative in different ways, that's one of the main reasons why I like to be in the jury and to look at the different projects.
For me, also, what I always like, what I really adore, if a team manages to also to bridge media. So if you can combine digital and analog, I love it when things blend there, so that you don't only have like an app that works as an app, which can be fine and serves a specific task, but when you see worlds blending and things interacting in a kind of magic way, magic because it both worlds fit well together, and because it's not separated. I adore that, and I hope to see a lot of submissions that manage to do that.
For me, rather than expecting, maybe a bit more anticipating or looking forward to, is touches on what we discussed before with the diversity of different industries, and also pulling our attention as a jury to a certain industry with a specific problem. Those entries I enjoy a lot. Not in an unselfish way, to be honest, also because it's fantastic to learn about something that we never thought about, simply because there's a million things out there, and then someone comes along with an entry and says, hello, we are an industry. Yes, we do exist, and this is also what I love about what we do as a jury, to offer a platform to new thoughts, new industries, new problems, new challenges, and for the rest of the world, so that we actually see, wow, okay, I never realized, and yes, fantastic, and great that you're here and that you're showing us these things. And that again, though, brings me back to these rather strict wishes that what we had before, and that which is, please give us the context, help us understand what is that industry really, because we might never have heard about that before, and show us what's so exciting about this in your own words. It doesn't have to be technical or anything. In your own words, just say, this is why I love my job, why it's so difficult, and what I wish for, what many in my professional cohort wish for, and that's something I'm looking forward to.
Yes, and it might even be a business solution or something very technical, and it makes an impact on people using it every day, and it's better than the status quo before it, or the previous version, or what's out there in the market, and that also counts. We had a jury member who said making kids sit through a long journey in the back seat and having fun counts as much as it counts to help a worker do a job in a more safe, faster, more efficient way, and maybe enjoy his job or her job as well, also counts. So the range is very broad. So thank you very much for sharing all of these insights and also opening up this very wide gamut of thought, and the different angles you've shared, and of course also about feasibility and how things will come to the market, and how to frame this right. So thank you very much for your time, for being here. I hope you enjoyed this small talk as much as I did. We could talk on, I think, for hours about this, and we will in the next jury sessions. We will.
Probably.
So thank you very much for being here today across different cities and countries. We'll be looking forward to seeing you on this and the next and upcoming jury panels again. And that's it for this special episode of the UX Conversation. I hope that you enjoyed listening as well. And if you're working on great products, then send it to these great people who you've just been hearing about, and many, many more who are on the jury panels, and let them review your work and let us honor your great work, because this is what awards are about. It's about communicating the power that design can have on business, people, societies as well. You can find more about the awards on our website, of course, uxdesignawards.com, and please look it up for also upcoming events, reviews of and recordings of past events, and of course, you can follow us on social media, LinkedIn, etc., and YouTube as well. So until next time, take care and see you soon, hopefully. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye bye. See you soon.
Bye.